Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. Have 16 articles for you here on Memorial Day. URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first article I have for you is off of Newsmax. It says, Axios. Trump tells confidants U.S. will leave Paris climate deal. President Donald Trump has told confidants, including the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, that he plans to leave a landmark international agreement on climate change. Axios news outlet reported on Saturday, citing three sources with direct knowledge. On Saturday, Trump said in a Twitter post he would make a decision on whether to support the Paris climate deal next week. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A source who has been in contact with people involved in the decision told Reuters a couple of meetings were planned with chief executives of energy companies and big corporations and others about the climate agreement ahead of Trump's expected announcement later in the week. It was unclear whether those meetings would still take place. I will make my final decision on the Paris Accord next week, he tweeted on the final day of a group of 7 G7 summits in Italy, which he refused to bow to pressure from allies to back the landmark 2015 agreement. The summit of G7 wealthy nations pitted Trump against the leaders of Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Canada, and Japan on several issues, with European diplomats frustrated at having to revisit questions they had hoped were long settled. Trump, who had previously called global warming a hoax, came under concerned pressure from other leaders to honor the 2015 Paris Agreement on curbing carbon emissions. Although he tweeted that he would make a decision next week, his apparent reluctance to embrace the first legally binding global climate deal that was signed by 195 countries clearly annoyed German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The entire discussion about the climate was very difficult, if not to say very dissatisfying, she told reporters. There are no indications whether the United States will stay in the Paris Agreement or not. The next article is off of Western Journalism. It says, media in hysterics after Trump revealed publicly available information to Philippines president. President Donald Trump caught the ire of media when it was revealed he told Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte in a phone call the presence of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines near North Korea. The transcript of the April 29th call, in which Trump boasted of the U.S. military presence near North Korea, was published online by The Intercept. We have a lot of firepower over there, Trump said, according to the transcript. 2 submarines, the best in the world. We have 2 nuclear submarines. Not that we want to use them at all, Trump added. I've never seen anything like they are, but we don't have to use this. But he would be crazy, so we will see what happens. BuzzFeed News reported Pentagon officials are in shock over Trump's disclosure of the whereabouts of 2 nuclear submarines. We never talk about subs, 3 Pentagon officials told BuzzFeed News. Brad Jaffe, NBC News senior news editor, piled on, tweeting that the locations of nuclear submarines are not usually something we talk about. However, Emily Jasinski of the Washington Examiner notes the U.S. Navy publicly announced April 25th the presence of one of the nuclear-powered submarines in Busan, South Korea, 4 days prior to Trump's conversation with Philippine president. Ohio-class guided missile submarine USS Michigan arrived in Busan April the 25th for routine visit during a regular scheduled deployment to the Western Pacific, the Navy announced. We are looking forward to a chance to meet up with our Republic of Korean Navy partners and learn about the culture of Korea for the first time for many of us, myself included, said Captain Joe Turk, Michigan's commanding officer. On May the 2nd, 2 days after Trump's phone call, the Navy publicly announced the presence of the second nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Cheyenne, at Sasebo, Japan. The fact that the Navy announced within 2 days of Trump's call with the Philippines president the presence of nuclear submarines has Jansky believing the media is making a mountain out of a molehill. Given that the Navy itself had released news of Michigan's arrival days before the phone call even took place, reports characterizing Trump's comments as revelation are probably a bit hysterical, Jasinski wrote. And let's see here. Get some things under control here on this computer. Next one is off of Western Journalism. It says White House aides return home to plan for Trump's counterattack. Try this again. The president, who as a candidate took the art of political counterpunching to a never before imagined level, is gearing up for a political war without end. The White House is embracing the fight, which is going to last as long as Donald Trump is president. A new report on Axios quotes what it called a Trump ally as saying, "We're getting street fighters ready to go." The report characterized the return to Washington of Chief of Staff Reince Priebus and Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, who flew to Saudi Arabia with President Donald Trump, but returned early in the week as one piece of the puzzle, saying they were going to quarterback plans for Trump's counterattack. Reports agree that aides will be using the rest of the time they have while Trump is overseas to finalize plans for his review upon his return. CNN said the planning will focus on a high-octane communication strategy. There's got to be a stronger rapid response and communication effort overall. CNN quoted what it said was White House officials as saying, whether it's the crisis of the moment or long term, it's got to improve. That's the decision. How does that take shape? Those involved would fight political and Russian-related fires so White House officials, distracted by the investigation into Russia and other probes impacting the Trump White House, can return their focus to Trump's legislative and policy agenda. In my experience, it's exactly the right thing to do because it allows you, to the greater extent possible, to contain the investigation, to keep the investigation away from White House business, and to keep it out of the daily press briefings, said Mark Fabiani, who managed the Whitewater investigation crisis response for former President Bill Clinton. The enemies Trump is fighting, according to Trump ally quoted Axios, are nameless, faceless, deep state types who have been leaking information to the media. Who is going to become part of the so-called war room is a matter of speculation. The website Politico reported Trump has approached Corey Ludnowski, Trump's first campaign manager, and David Bossie, Trump's deputy campaign manager, about being crisis managers for his administration. As reported by the Western Journalism, Ludnowski and Bossie both visited the White House last week, sparking initial rumors they would be part of a shakeup to replace White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer or other members of Trump's communication team. In writing about the next phase of Trump's counterattack, Mike Allen of Axios noted that the success of that plan depends partly on President Trump's willingness to compartmentalize. Close allies have trouble imagining that. The next article is off of Breitbart. It says Politico, Trump's war on regulations is his biggest untold success. Politico reports Sunday the push to block, rewrite, and delay scores of Obama-era rules may be the Trump administration's biggest untold success. That declaration comes just 1 month after Politico mocked President Donald Trump's efforts to use the Congressional Review Act, or the CRA, to reverse his predecessor's rules. None of it, Politico declared, evoked the drain the swamp, anti-establishment populism that Trump rode to the presidency. Trump's ardent supporters and detractors alike tend to exaggerate the impact of the 13 rules he's rescinding. Out of more than 20,000 approved under President Obama, Politico's Michael Grunwald wrote on April the 10th, adding, "For the most part, Republicans won't score many political points with their CRA victories." He also argued that the deadline for repealing Obama-era regulations on the CRA had told, though others um, would argue that it extended all the way back to the beginning of Obama's presidency, covering any regulation that was not reported to Congress. At the time, Breitbart News called Trump's use of CRA's legislative milestone, arguing that Trump's use of the CRA is use of the CRA to repeal regulations has put future administrations on notice that there is a limit to government's regulatory reach, and that given the opportunity by the voters, conservatives will enforce those limits. Now, Politico's Andrew Restusini and Nancy Cook seem to agree, and they fill in the rest of the picture, noting that Trump's executive orders and executive actions amount to a series of actions that could reshape American life for decades. Efforts to rewrite or wipe out the regulations affecting everything from student loans and restaurant menus to internet privacy, workplace injuries, and climate change. They add, Trump is setting bureaucratic wheels in motion that could eventually axe or revise hundreds of regulations as agencies reorient themselves toward unwinding red tape and granting speedier approvals to projects. If successful, these efforts could represent the most far-reaching rollback of federal regulation since Ronald Reagan's presidency, especially if Trump's proposed budget cuts make it harder for a future Democratic president to re-accelerate the rulemaking apparatus. Trump's assault on regulations represents a fulfillment of core campaign promise and the execution of what advisor Steve Bannon called in February the deconstruction of the administrative state. The next article is off of rickwells.us. Says Tillerson State Department doubles refugee import levels while Trump is overseas. The strange goings-on at the State Department continue, with nobody other than Secretary himself behaving in a manner that would be reflective of the new president's leadership and consistent with his agenda. If he's truly representing the president, another round of wholesale firings is clearly in order. Earlier this month, the State Department fought the release of 2 unredacted emails to Judicial Watch that contain information relevant to the criminal activities of Hillary Clinton, and on Friday, they acted as representatives of Hillary Clinton in a lawsuit by 2 family members of the victims of Clinton's fatal mischief in Benghazi. America is tired of the secrecy of our shadow government and our supposedly legitimate version as well. We hired Donald Trump to clean the mess up, not to allow business to continue as usual. They work for him and for us. In yet another instance where the State Department is acting as if Hussein Obama is still in the White House, in a Democrat-style Thursday before a holiday weekend email notification, they revealed that the restrictions on the flow of refugees, terrorists, and terrorist sympathizer applicants into the U.S. would now be readjusted to Hussein Obama's "the sky's the limit" levels, effective immediately. That certainly is contrary to what President Trump promised the American people and to our national security interest. It happened in the immediate aftermath of the Manchester terrorist bombing that killed 22 innocent Brits, so it's understandable that the corrupt deep state forces of evil would want to keep it out of the public view as much as possible. They also did it while President Trump is out of the country, although if that was intended as protection, it should prove to be ineffective. President Trump could easily order Tillerson to rescind the policy change upon his return, fire those responsible, and use it to educate those allowed to keep their jobs as the hazards of going rogue. In an email from one of those who might be looking for employment next week, Jennifer Smith, the State Department notified refugee groups that they could begin bringing refugees into the U.S. unconstrained by the weekly quotas that were in place. The New York Times reported there was no limit between the decision also on Thursday of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals to support the usurpation of presidential authority by the Obama judge in Baltimore, the unconstitutional suspension of his executive order, and the policy change. The number of imported foreigners could double from what is now being reported as 830 a week to approximately 1,500 a week by June, just a few days away. Earlier this week, the Pew, P-E-W, however you want to pronounce that, Pew Research Center reported current levels were 70% below those of October of 2016. Unless October was the aberration, their report doesn't quite jibe with what the New York Times is reporting as what are now the new previous levels. The great deal that was negotiated to fund the government through the rest of the fiscal year in May, unlike the one that preceded it, did not restrict the amount of money that could be spent on importing a replacement population. We're told it was a financial decision to open the throttle all the way once they had unlimited resources to spend on our destruction. There were no refugee caps. The problem with the way this government is run, other than the corruption of adversarial posture to the American people, just because they have money in a budget doesn't mean it all has to be spent. Rex Tillerson should know this. Exxon probably didn't get to where they are by pissing away every cent they had in the bank. The United States most certainly did. The State Department did act alone in their treachery, or didn't act alone in their treachery. The spokeswoman told the New York Times that they raised the levels after consulting with the Department of Justice. It seems Attorney General Sessions likewise has some house cleaning to do. They may claim that the budget mandated they spend the money on that purpose. There are lots of ways to spend money without bringing in more bodies. They could distribute funds to states having to cover the cost of this insanity or something along those lines. They need to be creative. Hussein Obama got away with throwing $1 billion that wasn't approved into the Green Climate Slush Fund, and there wasn't a damn thing that Congress could or was willing to do to stop it. It's a matter of desire and will, and it's complicated by the deep state subversion that exists. Trump needs to get it cleaned up or get someone in there who can. It's not that tough. People who are no longer allowed in the building and whose credentials no longer access the system can't do much damage. Issue a correction of policy and fire those responsible and do it immediately. The next article is on humansarefree.com. It says Amnesty International. U.S. gave ISIS $1 billion worth of arms in 2016. $1 billion worth of arms and equipment to ISIS in Iran, in Iraq during President Obama's final year in office, according to Amnesty International. The human rights group said the figures came from a 2016 U.S. government audit obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. This audit provides a worrying insight into the U.S. Army's flawed and potentially dangerous system for controlling millions of dollars worth of arms transfers to a hugely volatile region. Patrick Wilkin, Amnesty's researcher on international arms control, said in a statement. It makes for especially sobering reading given the long history of leakage of the U.S. arms to multiple armed groups committing atrocities in Iraq, including the armed group called itself Islamic State. In 2015, the U.S. gave $1.57 billion worth of equipment to Iraq to help them fight ISIS through the Iraq Train and Equip Fund. Now it's been revealed they also funded the enemy, providing them with weapons. The Army's 1st Theater Sustainment Command did not have accurate, up-to-date records on quantity and location of Iraq Train and Equip Fund equipment on hand in Kuwait and Iraq. The Pentagon's Inspector General wrote in the audit, the Hill reports, tens of thousands of assault rifles, hundreds of mortar rounds, and armored Humvees were among the equipment given to ISIS in Iraq, Amnesty said. According to Amnesty, the U.S. Army's lack of control over its weapons was also exposed in 2015 audit. In 2015, audit prompted Congress to commit to keeping a stricter control of its weapons. Hawaii Representative Gabbard went to Syria on a secret fact-finding mission to wade through the lies and propaganda and find out what is really happening on the ground. Immediately on her return, CNN booked her for an exclusive interview, and Gabbard told them exactly what they didn't want to hear. She has proof the Obama administration was funding ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Explaining to Jake Tapper that she met people from all walks of life in Aleppo and Damascus, Gabbard said that Syrians expressed happiness and joy at seeing an American walking their streets, but they also wanted to know, why is it that the United States, its allies, and other countries are providing support, are providing arms to terrorist groups like al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, who are on the ground there, raping, kidnapping, torturing, and killing the Syrian people? They asked me, why is the United States supporting these terrorist groups who are destroying Syria when it was Al-Qaeda who attacked the United States on 9/11, not Syria? I didn't have an answer for that. That was more than Jake Tapper, who was hostile from the beginning of the interview, could handle. His face screwed up. Tapper lashed out, saying, obviously, the United States government denies providing any sort of help to the terrorist groups you're talking about. They say they provide help to the rebel groups. If that was supposed to be Tapper's knockout blow, Gabbard saw it coming a mile away. Without missing a beat, she calmly deconstructed his ideological and savagely wrong talking points. The reality is, Jake, and I'm glad you brought up that point, every place that I went, every person I spoke to, I asked this question to them, and without hesitation, they said there are no modern rebels. Who are these moderate rebels that people are speaking of? Regardless of the names of these groups, the strongest fighting force on the ground in Syria is al-Nusra or Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That is a fact. There are a number of different other groups. All of them are fighting alongside with or under the command of the strongest group on the ground that is trying to overthrow Assad. So if you wonder where your tax dollars are going, there you go. Next one is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says, DHS Secretary Kelly says, stay in your homes. It's dangerous out there. U.S. trained and Saudi-funded Wahhabi terrorists are lurking in the shadows, according to John Kelly, Trump's boss over at the Department of Homeland Security and former commander of the United States Southern Command. I was telling Fox host Steve Doocy on the way in here if he knew what I knew about terrorism in the morning, Kelly said on Fox and Friends, according to The Hill. Kelly said terrorism is everywhere. It's constant. It's nonstop. The good news for us in America is we have amazing people protecting us every day, but it can happen here almost any time. Here's what Kelly didn't tell you. The number of Americans who died worldwide in terrorist attacks in 2015 was minimum number who died after being struck by lightning was 29. In 2009, nearly 500,000 Americans died from heart disease, while cancer killed 175,339, and chronic respiratory disease claimed 143,382 lives, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. The chances of being killed in a terrorist attack are about 1 in 20 million. A person is as likely to be killed by his or her own furniture and more likely to die in a car accident, drown in a bathtub, or building a fire than from a terrorist attack, notes this life insurance website. Maybe Kelly should warn Americans about the danger of driving cars or the hazards posed by sofas, but that wouldn't feed into the terror narrative, which is primarily a scare tactic to get Americans to support bombing foreign lands, which in turn creates terrorists like Salman Abedi, who killed people because he was upset about Syrian and Libyan Muslims slaughtered by the Trump rehashed coalition of the willing. Kelly's remarks remind me of the Ice-T Shut Up, Be Happy narrative by Jello Biafra. The next article is off of Liberty Headlines. As pastors issue defiant statement in support of Trump's travel ban. A group of North Carolina pastors is making waves for putting up a billboard along an interstate highway with a defiant message in defense of President Donald Trump's travel ban. The billboard reads, "Why support President Trump's immigration ban? 19 Muslim immigrants killed 2,977 Americans September 11th of 2001. Own voice of truth in a desert wasteland of political correctness, we've chosen to prominently place this billboard for maximum impact on the westbound lane of I-40 in western North Carolina," the North Carolina Pastors Network announced in a May 20th statement. The Pastors Network, which claims to have support from 600 North Carolinian pastors, said if the terrorists who perpetrated 9/11 attacks were Christians, there would have been no September 11th. The dilemma we face with Islamic terrorism is one of the religion itself, plain and simple. Islamic theology is a problem, the NCPN said. If America refuses to correctly identify the enemy, Islamic ideology, many more Americans will be offered up on the altars of political correctness, pluralism, and postmodernism. Dave Kistler, the head of the NCPN, told WSOC-TV in Charlotte, the billboard is not intended to spread hate against Muslims. "I'm saying it now that this is not what this is about," Kistler said. "There's certainly nothing hateful in our billboard. Some have interpreted it to be that, and to say that it was not. It is the truth. I'm not worried about offending Muslims. I don't hate them. This is not a slight against any individual," Kistler told CNN. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says taxpayers to provide free attorneys for illegals because it's unfair they don't speak or read English. The sanctuary city of San Francisco is taking its harboring of illegal immigrants to the next level by providing free attorneys to those facing deportation. It's a free service to illegal immigrants, and taxpayers will foot the bill. The far left Huffington Post published a sympathetic story on Friday arguing that illegal immigrants deserve free attorneys because, after all, some of them cannot read, write, or speak a word of English. Author Michael McLaughlin highlighted the case of legal resident but convicted criminal McGill, whose real name is being withheld by his attorneys, nearly being deported because he couldn't understand English. On a video screen in a court to face a judge and was ordered to fill out an asylum application, an application he was given extra time to fill out since he appeared before the judge a month prior. "Sir, a conversation. You were supposed to fill out that application today, so I can find today that you've given up your application and find you removed," the judge told McGill, a Central American immigrant. "Sir, You can be removed right now from the United States because I don't appreciate people not following the court's orders, and you made a promise that the application was going to be filled out and sent today, and now you come with nothing. McGill argued that he didn't understand the language and couldn't find an attorney to represent him from the list he was given. The judge ultimately decided to give McGill one more time, or try this again, give McGill more time, but pro-illegal immigration activists argued that the scene is a familiar one for those who have snuck into America, and it is unfair. To a person undergoing them, they feel like a criminal process. The government brings up everything it can. Alameda County Public Defender Raha Jorgani, who is representing McGill, told the Post, "It's an absolutely bewildering process. We're talking about some of the most complicated laws in the nation. Actually, it's pretty simple. Don't enter the nation illegally and don't break the laws while you're here." San Francisco is the third area to have a free attorney program for illegal immigrants. It joins Alameda County and New York City. It is also the city where a convicted felon illegal immigrant murdered Kate Steinle in 2015. But that fact didn't stop the illegal immigrant sympathizers from wanting to help keep illegals, some of whom are convicted felons like McGill, in the nation. Having a lawyer evens the playing field. Hiroshi Motomura, a UCLA professor who is an expert in immigration law, told the Post, "Procedurally, it becomes much more fair fight. Arrests of illegal immigrants have risen 38% under President Donald Trump, and an additional $2.7 billion for border enforcement has been requested. Our goal is to create some semblance of due process in the immigration court. There's one thing that we can bank on. Trump wants to deport more people and be aggressive. He's put a ton of fear into immigrant communities." Ugarte, who conveniently left out the word illegal, said. Those opposed to the free attorney program argued that it is a waste of government resources. I don't believe there is an appetite among the citizens of California to use their taxpayer dollars to defend undocumented immigrants who may have committed crimes, California Representative Party official Sue Caro told the Mercury News. Yet the Bleeding Hearts continue to believe the program is worthwhile. "It's past time that we provide representation for these people," San Francisco's public defender Jeff Adachi told the News. "You're locked up in prison or jail facility, often far, far away from your family. You don't speak the language and you don't have any resources. You need help," Adachi said. "A good way not to be far away from your family in a place where you don't speak the language is not to sneak into a nation and break its laws." Next article's off of BizPack Review. It says, "This is unbelievable. Former Secret Service Dan Bogneau, kind of hell FBI has power to bring Trump." Former Secret Service Dan Bogneau has chilling warning for Americans. From a rare insider's perspective, Bogneau sounded the alarm about the massive power of federal law enforcement agencies and the kind of hell the FBI can bring down on a person for simply ripping the tag off of a mattress. "This is unbelievable," he told Fox and Friends hosts on Saturday. He warned of the investigation into the alleged Russian ties with Trump administration. "This is an evidence-free investigation that is simply determined to take down the President of the United States and his network." He called the Russian obsession a stain on the nation and argued that history is going to look at this as a black eye moment and is going to be horrified at what happened with this investigation. "We can even call it that anymore." Discussing the Friday report from the Washington Post that said President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner attempted to set up a secret back-channel communication with Russian ambassador, which the Post admitted later in the article was common and not illegal, Bogneau annihilated the paper. "The Washington Post cares about two things and two things only," Bogneau charged. "Number one, clicks. They want your money. And number two, taking down the president." He also ridiculed the comparison to the current investigation in Watergate based on one major disparity. The way it worked in Watergate was crime and then investigation, he explained. It doesn't work investigation and then let's go find a crime somewhere. Bogneau also took aim at Hillary Clinton's speech at her alma mater, Wesley College, in which she whined and compared President Trump to former President Nixon. Clinton told the graduates that they are living in a political time where there's a full-fledged assault on truth and reason. Bogneau found that to be hilarious with its irony. This is a woman whose campaign had to use BleachBit to erase the truth and reason on her email scandal. And this is a woman whose campaign crew took hammers to blackberries to avoid truth and reason from actually being uncovered, he said. Truth and reason are the enemies of Hillary Clinton. They're night and day. The next article is off of Conservative Tribune. It says Democrat actions raise blackmail speculation. An unusual case involving former IT employees for Democrat members, some aides believing the Democrats are trying to blackmail them. According to the Daily Caller, Imran Awan and 3 of his relatives have been banned from the congressional network for data theft after serious allegations, including a report from Politico that they had breached security a number of times. Yet, according to several IT staffers who spoke with the Daily Caller, members of Congress have displayed an intense loyalty towards the suspects who police say victimized them. The baffled aides wonder if the suspects are blackmailing representatives based on the contents of their emails and files to which they had full access. I don't know what they have, but they have something on someone. It's been months at this point with no arrests or charges, said Pat Sowers, an IT manager who has worked in Congress over a decade. Something is rotten in Denmark. According to the Daily Caller, Awan started working for the former DNC head, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida in 2005, and his wife and his brother's wife and 2 of his brothers all appeared on the payrolls of various House Democrats soon after, payroll records show. $4 million since 2010. This isn't minor stuff either. Politico reported that the 4 are accused of stealing equipment from members' offices without their knowledge and committing serious, potentially illegal violations on the House IT network, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the probe. There's no question about it. If I was accused of a tenth of what these guys are accused of, they'd take me out in handcuffs the same day, or I'd never work again, a manager at the tech service company said. The Pakistani-born Awan was also accused of threatening his Pakistani stepmother relatives if she talked to authorities, according to the Daily Caller. One Democrat-linked contractor even told the Daily Caller that party bigwigs are saying, don't say anything, this will blow over if we don't say anything. The Awan family, they say, had members in their pocket, and there are a lot of members who could go down over this. That sounds an awful lot like blackmail, enough so that it makes us wonder why people aren't talking about this. It's time Congress investigates. Next article is off of Fellowship of the Minds, and it says, John Podesta in a frenzy, converting $40 billion Clinton's foundation assets into gold, diamonds, and artwork. Independent journalist George Webb says after President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, longtime Democrat operative and Clinton loyalist John Podesta is in a frenzy to unload $40 billion from the Clinton Foundation by buying up art, gold, and diamonds and spreading out all over the world before those assets are seized by a new FBI director. Beginning there's a video here that you can watch, and it says, beginning at the 30-second mark in the video alone above, Webb says, right now, John Podesta is buying up artwork between every Jewish art dealer. Webb is asked, how do you know that? And he answered, I have a contact within the French intelligence that's told me that. So they're buying up artwork right now, and they know every art dealer that he's buying art from. What you're dealing with is Trump could go get that $40 billion right now and seize those assets. So before a new FBI director is named, you start moving this stuff to gold, diamonds, artwork, and so forth, and you put it in your network out into as many different countries as possible, so it will be difficult to actually go seize. You have to contractual, or try this again, you have a contractual issue or an international issue every time you try to get some of this stuff that's been moved. The money right now is being moved by John Podesta to artwork, diamonds, and gold. As explained by Forbidden Knowledge TV's Alexandra Bruce, Webb sees the Seth Rich murder as just a small part of a much bigger picture of high-level racketeering by Hillary Clinton, her minions, and whoever she's fronting. It's an outrageous amount of money that's been amassed over some 20 years. Webb calls the Clintons racketeering, including drug running, the Clintons' rat line. Bruce continues by saying, Webb then proceeds to illustrate how the drug running between Afghanistan and Punjab to Pakistan to Turkey in Sirlik Air Base to NATO in Mons, Belgium. Webb says large military transport planes like C-130s are used to transfer raw opium from Afghanistan to Pakistan, where they are refined into opioid medications, which are then contracted out by mobbed up doctors to places like VA, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where these generic drugs, usually watered down to half or quarter strength, are distributed from Belgium. He says information about all of the above can be found in the Congressional BlackBerry phone network. He describes these activities as just Mena, Arkansas airport, on a global scale, just longer distances. It's very simple. Drugs go one way, arms go the other way. Half of the cargo gets left in Belgium, and the rest comes to the United States. In the past, he's mentioned Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, as well as an airport in Rockford, Illinois, where drugs were smuggled in shipments of mangoes and basmati rice. Except that instead of the $1 million a day worth of cocaine being brought in at Mena, Webb claims in another one of its blizzards of micro posts that Offutt Air Force Base receives $1 billion per day in opioids. The next article is off of Conservative Tribune. GOP rep drops bombshell and Seth Rich claims in local paper. CNN freaks. Despite a concerted effort on the parts of Democrats, both in government and the media, a number of Americans remain unconvinced as to the official story regarding the alleged hacking of the Democrat National Committee's emails by Russian government-sponsored hackers, with some suspecting the hack was actually an insider leak by murdered DNC staffer Seth Rich. According to Real Clear Politics, Republican Texas Representative Blake Farenthold is one of those unconvinced Americans, and he just called for a full-on federal investigation of the matter during an appearance on CNN. During that appearance, Farenthold pointed out that no federal or local law enforcement agencies ever actually inspected the purportedly hacked server for themselves, but instead relied upon an outside group of contracted by the DNC to inform them of what had happened. My fear is our constant focusing on the Russians is deflecting away from some of the other things that we need to be investigating, Farenthold told CNN. There's still some question as to whether the intrusion of the DNC server was an insider job or whether or not it was the Russians. What evidence? I'm sorry, the insider job? What are you referring to here? Because I hope it's not this information that Fox News just refused to be reporting. Anchor John Berman pushed back testily, to which Farenthold replied, again, there's stuff circulating on the internet. What's circulating on the internet that you think is worthy of congressional investigation, Berman pressed, because the DNC police are investigating this, and so far they haven't said there's any there. Yet the DNC police, or try this again, yet the DC police, there we go, nor no federal investigation has ever had a look at the DNC computer. Farenthold fired back. We're relying only on the report that someone that the DNC contacted to examine their computer rather than having federal officials. To me, we need to let the feds look at it. Hilariously and without hint of irony, co-host Poppy Harlow asked the congressman if he thought it was responsible as a representative to be discussing unproven things that are swirling on the internet, apparently oblivious to the mountain of baseless allegations against President Donald Trump also swirling on the internet that Democrats in Congress, as well as their own network, routinely speak about as if they were proven facts. In separate interview with the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, Farenthold reiterated his belief that the alleged Russian hacking of the DNC, as well as the suspicious death of the DNC staffer Rich, should be investigated in the same manner as the alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election, the paper reported. That should be a part of ongoing investigation into the alleged Russian interference in the election because that's an alternative theory that deserves being looked at, Farenthold said. Noted internet hacker Kim.com recently put out a statement claiming that he knew firsthand that Seth Rich was involved in the leaking of DNC documents, claiming that Rich had become disgusted with the DNC. Kim further stated that he would be willing to testify as much and more to federal authorities under certain conditions, such as guarantee of safe passage by newly minted special counsel Robert Mueller to the U.S. from his home in New Zealand. Fox News host Sean Hannity has also been pressing the Seth Rich story, which has earned him a second scoop of spite from leftists as they seek to silence him by pressuring his advertisers to pull out of his programs. When leftists in the media got exceptionally worked up over trying to advance a narrative or debunk a particular story, especially one unflattering or incriminating to Democrats, it often means there is some fire hidden behind all of the smoke. There is a lot of smoke emanating from the Seth Rich DNC WikiLeaks story and Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, they're acting awfully anxious about it. Perhaps it's time for a full federal investigation of the matter, as Representative Farenthold called for. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says, best response ever. CBS News asked Mad Dog Mattis what keeps him up at night. Secretary of Defense James Mattis showed a bit of what led to his Mad Dog moniker during a CBS News interview that aired on Face the Nation Sunday. After discussing a string of threats facing the United States, host John Dickerson asked the former Marine Corps general what kept him awake at night. Nothing, Mattis replied without hesitating so much as a second. I keep other people awake at night. The response earned a smile from CBS News host, a mountain of praise on social media. And there's a whole slew of tweets here. I'll read a couple of them. One says, without missing a beat. Another one says, Trump is lucky, too, that someone so clear of thought can be associated with him. Heaven help the administration if he stepped aid. And let's see, another one down here says, best response ever. Another one says, he is awesome. Finally, the Washington Free Beacon was so impressed, its editors put together what they called a beast mode video, complete with complimentary footage and appropriate sound effects. So if you want to watch that, you can pull that article up and take a look at that. Next article I have is off of Fox News, and it says, more arrests in Manchester attack. UK remains on high alert. British police made 2 more arrests and stormed 3 more locations Sunday as they hunted for suspects in the Manchester bombing, while a government minister said members of attacker Salman Abedi's network may still be at large. Greater Manchester Police said 2 men, one 25 years old and the other 19, were arrested in the city on suspicion of terrorist offenses. 11 other men between the ages of 18 and 44 also were in custody. Most of the searches and arrests since Monday night's bombing have been in multi-ethnic South Manchester, where Abedi, the son of Libyan parents, was born and raised. Police say that 1,000 people are working on the investigation, trying to track down Abedi's accomplices and piece together his movements in the days before he detonated a bomb at the Ariana Grande concert. The explosion killed 22 people, including 7 children under the age of 18, and injured more than 100. Abedi died in the blast. Investigators say they have dismantled a large part of his network, but expect to make more arrests. Operation is still at full tilt, Home Secretary Amber Rudd said, adding that some suspects could remain at large. Until the operation is complete, we can't entirely be sure that it is closed, she said. British police now have 13 suspects in custody, including Abedi's elder brother Ismail, and have searched properties across Manchester, a city in northwest England. Another brother and Abedi's father have been detained in Libya. Police have released surveillance camera images of Abedi on the night of the attack that show him dressed in sneakers, jeans, and a dark jacket and baseball cap. The straps of the backpack are visible on his shoulders. Authorities are appealing for more information about his final days. They say he returned to Britain from Libya on May the 18th and likely completed assembling his bomb at a rented apartment in central Manchester. There were prayers for the victims at church services across Manchester on Sunday. In Rome, Pope Francis led thousands of people in St. Peter's Square in prayer, saying he was close to the relatives of all those who are weeping for the dead. On Saturday, Britain lowered its official terrorism threat level from critical to severe after police say they had dismantled a large part of Abedi's network. But security remained high at major events across Britain on Sunday, including the Great Manchester Run Road Race, where police armed with submachine guns protected thousands of participants and spectators. Peter Hook, a member of seminal Manchester band New Order, was among the runners and said the tragedy had brought people together. I've always had a pride in this city ever since I was born, he said. They picked the wrong people to mess with this time. The government is facing criticism after acknowledging that Abedi was on security services radar but wasn't a major focus of scrutiny. Rudd said Sunday that intelligence agencies were monitoring 3,000 suspected extremists and had a wide pool of 20,000 people of interest. I would not rush to conclusions that they have somehow missed something, Rush said. The family of one victim, 18-year-old Georgiana Callender, said her life had been cut short by evil men preparing to ruin lives and destroy families. I wish I could say that Georgiana is one of the last to die in this way, but unless our government opens its eyes, we know we are only another in a long line of parents on the list that continues to grow, the family said in a statement released through Greater Manchester Police. And the final article that I have for you this morning is off of BizPack Review. It says, as a cool thank you to veterans, man rebuilds entire roof as the American flag. In a fitting tribute this Memorial Day weekend, an Albuquerque man is shouting his love for America from the rooftops in a display designed to support those who have served their country. Rick Gabdalon, whose father served in World War II, decided to turn his entire roof into an American flag, according to KOB4. From me and my family to all the veterans, thank you, Gabdalon said. And there is a picture of it here in this article if you want to pull it up. And it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Gabdelon explained that his roof had been in need of repair for some time and that he had been thinking about the patriotic gesture for the last 2 years. And while initially startled, he says his neighbors are getting on board. The neighbors first kind of freaked out a little bit, but once they understood where it was coming from, they understood, Gabdelon said. We might not all agree on the politics and the way our country is run sometimes, but we do live in a free country. Be proud of that, he said. Gabdelon hopes to add the finishing touches by the end of next week, KOB4 reported. That being putting on the glow-in-the-dark stars in the blank blue field. And there's some video in it if you want to see that as well. Very, very cool. And that's all I have for you. I wish you a happy Memorial Day. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.